Imagine for a moment that you're sitting near a fire as the last light fades from the sky, and the air around you is cooling in that particular way that makes you pull your knees closer to your chest, closer to the warmth. There are no streetlights here, no hum of electricity, no distant traffic creating that constant white noise you've learned to ignore. There's just the crackling of burning wood, the occasional shift of someone nearby, and beyond that, the enormous presence of darkness settling over everything like a blanket. The stars above you are so bright they almost seem aggressive in their clarity, and you realise that you've never actually seen the night sky the way it truly is, the way it actually looks when there's nothing between you and the universe except air. The fire throws shadows that dance and flicker, and you watch them because there's nothing else to watch, no screen to check, no notifications waiting, just the simple, an ancient act of watching flames move and feeling warmth on your face while the night presses in from all sides. This is where we need to begin, because everything you think you know about early humans, about the lives of your ancestors who lived tens of thousands of years ago, has probably been filtered through a very specific lens, a lens shaped by museums and textbooks and documentaries that show brief dramatic moments. The hunt, the cave painting, the moment of discovery, but almost never show you the thing that actually defined their lives, which was simply the long, slow, repetitive passage of days and nights, the ordinary hours that stretched between those rare moments of drama. We tend to imagine early human life as either brutal and desperate, a constant struggle against starvation and predators, or as somehow noble and pure, a paradise lost where people lived in perfect harmony with nature. Whereas both of these images are comforting in their own way because they're simple, because they give us a clear story, but neither one is quite true. The reality is stranger and quieter and more human than either extreme, and to understand it, we can't look at the exceptional moments. We have to look at the ordinary ones. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend a day and a night with early humans, not during a hunt or a migration or a moment of crisis, but during a completely normal day, the kind of day that happened thousands upon thousands of times in succession, the kind of day that made up the vast majority of human existence for most of our history as a species. We're going to wake up when they woke up, eat what they ate, do what they did, feel what they felt, and slowly, gradually, you'll begin to understand something that's almost impossible to grasp from the outside, which is that these were not primitive versions of us, not rough drafts or early attempts at humanity. They were us, fully human, fully conscious, fully capable of joy and boredom and curiosity and love and everything else you feel, just living in a world that operated according to different rules. And if you're listening to this as you're settling down for the night, if you're letting these words wash over you while your own day finally releases its grip on your mind, then you're in exactly the right place. Because what we're about to explore is ultimately a story about rest and wakefulness, about the deep rhythms that governed human life for far longer than cities, or agriculture, or anything we think of as civilization. Before we're done, you'll understand why you sleep the way you do, why certain things feel comfortable and others don't, why your body responds to firelight differently than it responds to the blue glow of a screen, and why some part of you, some very old part, still knows exactly what it means to be human in the darkness. If you find yourself drifting off as we go, that's perfectly fine. In fact, it's ideal. Let the words guide you down into sleep if they want to, and if you enjoy falling asleep to this kind of quiet exploration of history, you might want to subscribe so you'll have more of these journeys waiting for you on other nights. But that's entirely up to you. For now, just settle in, let the day go, and come back with me to a morning that happened thousands of years ago, but which in all the ways that matter is not really different from this morning, or from the morning that will come tomorrow when the sun rises again and another day begins. The first thing you need to understand about waking up as an early human is that you didn't do it all at once. There was no alarm, no sudden jolt from sleep into wakefulness, no immediate need to be somewhere or do something according to a clock. Instead, you drifted up gradually from sleep, moving through layers of awareness, perhaps stirring slightly when you heard someone else moving nearby, perhaps pulling your covering, animal hide, woven grass, whatever kept you warm, a little tighter when the air felt cool, then drifting back down for a while longer. The fire from the night before would be low by now, just embers, and someone would eventually need to feed it, but there was no rush. The sky would be getting lighter, of that deep black softening into dark blue, and you'd become aware of it slowly, the way you become aware of birdsong or the smell of smoke or the feeling of your own breathing. This gradual waking was the norm for humans for hundreds of thousands of years, and your body still remembers it. That's why waking to an alarm always feels like a small violence, why your body protests and wants more time, why you feel groggy and disoriented when you're forced into wakefulness too quickly. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just designed for a different kind of morning, a morning where wakefulness comes in waves, where your brain has time to sort through the dreams of the night and prepare itself for the day ahead without being rushed. Early humans often woke partially during the night, lay there thinking for a while in the darkness, then drifted back to sleep. This wasn't insomnia in the way we understand it. It was normal, it was expected. And the solid 8-hour block of sleep we think of as healthy is actually a fairly modern invention, shaped by artificial light and work schedules. Your ancestors slept in segments, and between those segments they lay in the darkness, sometimes talking quietly with others who were also awake, sometimes just thinking, sometimes making love or telling stories or simply existing in that strange twilight state between sleep and full consciousness. So you're waking up, and it's gradual, and the first thing your brain does, even before you're fully aware of yourself as awake, is assess. This happens so fast and so automatically that you don't notice it, but it's there. Your hearing reaches out into the environment, checking for anything unusual, anything threatening, anything that requires immediate attention. You hear the normal sounds, other people breathing, someone coughing, a baby making small noises, the crackling of the fire being fed by whoever woke first. These sounds are safe sounds. They mean everything is as it should be. If there were silence, that would be wrong. If there were unfamiliar sounds, that would trigger immediate alertness. But these sounds are the sounds of your family, your group, and they're doing what they always do in the early morning, which is slowly transitioning from the vulnerability of sleep to the awareness of day. You open your eyes, and even though it's getting lighter, it's still quite dark where you are. You might be in a cave, though probably not a deep one. Early humans generally preferred rock overhangs or shallow caves, places that gave shelter from wind and rain, but didn't trap you far from the entrance. Or you might be in a temporary shelter made of branches and hides, something that took a few hours to construct and that you'll abandon in a few days or weeks when the group moves on. The important thing is that you're not alone. You're surrounded by people. Anywhere from 15 to maybe 50 individuals depending on the time and place and resource availability, and you've been sleeping near them all night, close enough to share warmth, close enough to hear them breathe. This is one of those things that's hard for modern people to fully grasp. The absolute lack of privacy, the constant presence of others, the fact that you essentially never spent a night alone in your entire life unless something had gone terribly wrong. But here's what's strange. It didn't feel claustrophobic. It felt safe. Your nervous system was calibrated for this kind of closeness, expected it, needed it. Being alone, truly alone, would have been terrifying, a sign that something was desperately wrong, that you'd been abandoned or lost. The presence of others, their sounds and smells and movements, was the baseline of safety. The thing that told your deepest brain that you could relax, that you weren't in immediate danger, that the night had passed without catastrophe, And now another day was beginning. Someone is already up feeding the fire, and you watch them for a moment without moving. It might be one of the older members of the group, someone who sleeps less deeply than the young adults. Or it might be someone who's taken on the informal role of firekeeper, the person who tends to wake first and make sure the embers from the night don't go out completely. Fire is life. Fire is safety. Fire is what keeps the predators at bay and the cold from seeping into your bones and the darkness from being absolute. Keeping fire going is one of the most important tasks there is, and it's harder than you probably think. You can't just let it die and start a new one whenever you want. Starting fire is difficult, time-consuming, not always successful, dependent on having the right materials and the right conditions. So you keep it going. You feed it carefully. You protect it from rain and wind, and if you're moving to a new camp, you carry it with you, embers wrapped in green leaves or smouldering in a piece of bark, kept alive through the journey so you don't have to start from nothing. You sit up slowly, and your body registers the coolness of the air, the stiffness in your muscles from sleeping on the ground, the need to urinate. These are the same sensations humans have felt every morning for as long as there have been humans. You're wearing something, probably not much depending on the climate, but something, and it's been on your body for days or weeks because clothing is precious and difficult to make, and there's no such thing as a wardrobe, no closet full of options. What you're wearing is probably what you wear most of the time, and it's practical, made from the hide of animals or from plant fibers if you're in the right environment, designed to protect you from thorns and sun and cold, but not to be beautiful in any decorative sense, though it might have some markings or decorations that identify you as part of this group, as having a certain role or status. You stand, stretching, and you walk away from the shelter area to relieve yourself. This is something you do without thinking, moving far enough away that you're not fouling the immediate living space, but not so far that you're vulnerable or out of sight. Other people are doing the same thing, and there's no embarrassment about it. No need for privacy beyond the basic practical distance. You're functioning bodies, and bodies need to do what they need to do, and this is simply part of the morning routine, as unremarkable as breathing. The sky is lighter now, that deep blue fading into something paler, and you can see the landscape around you taking shape. Where you are exactly depends on when and where in the vast span of early human history we're talking about. Early modern humans, the ones who are anatomically and mentally just like you and me, emerged around 200,000 years ago in Africa, and over the next 150,000 years or so, they spread across the entire world, adapting to deserts and forests and coastlines and grasslands, and eventually even ice-age tundra. But let's say for the sake of this particular day that you're in East Africa, somewhere in the region that was home to humans for the longest stretch of time, the place where everything about being human was refined and established over tens of thousands of generations. The landscape around you is savanna, that mixture of grassland and scattered trees, with hills in the distance and a water source, a river or a lake, maybe an hour's walk away. This is one of the richest environments on Earth in terms of biodiversity and food availability, and it's no accident that humans thrived here. There are animals everywhere, herds of grazing antelope and zebra, predators that follow the herds, birds in enormous variety, insects, reptiles, everything interconnected in a web of eating and being eaten that you're part of, not above, not separate from. You're one predator among many, not the strongest or the fastest or the most physically powerful, but the smartest, the most adaptable, the one with the ability to plan and communicate and work together in ways that no other species can match. You walk back toward the fire, and people are gathering around it now, most of the group waking up in that same gradual way you did, coming into the day slowly without urgency. There's no schedule. There's no place you need to be at a specific time. The day will unfold according to what needs to be done and what opportunities present themselves. And right now, what needs to be done is eat something, check in with each other, make a loose plan for the day, and let the sun warm the air a bit before anyone does anything too strenuous. Breakfast is not what you probably imagine. There's no big meal, no cooking in the sense of preparing a specific dish. Instead, there's eating from what's available, which means different things depending on what happened yesterday and the day before. If there was a successful hunt recently, there might be meat, either dried or still relatively fresh, being shared out. If someone found honey yesterday, there might be a little of that, carefully rationed because honey is precious, intensely sweet in a way that few other things are, packed with energy. More likely breakfast is nuts, seeds, fruits, tubers, insects, the foods that people, and especially women and children and older individuals, gather constantly, day after day. The foods that actually make up the majority of the early human diet. This is one of those things that the popular imagination gets backward. When people think of hunter-gatherers, they think of hunters first, as if hunting is the main activity and gathering is secondary, but the reality is the opposite. Gathering provides the reliable calories, the steady baseline of nutrition that keeps everyone fed day in and day out. Hunting is spectacular when it succeeds. Wool provides huge amounts of protein and fat that the group feasts on, but it's also unpredictable, difficult, often unsuccessful, and can't be relied on as a daily food source. The gatherers, mostly women but also children and older people, and sometimes men when hunting isn't happening, are the ones who ensure that no one starves, who know where to find the roots that store water during the dry season, who can identify which berries are ripe and which are poisonous, or who understand the landscape with an intimacy that allows them to feed the group even when the hunting is bad. So you're eating, let's say, some kind of starchy tuber that was dug up yesterday, something like a wild yam, and it's filling, if not particularly exciting, and you're eating it with your hands, maybe roasting it briefly in the edge of the fire to make it softer and easier to digest, and as you eat, you're talking. Language is one of the things that makes you human, maybe the most important thing, and you use it constantly, not just to convey information, but to connect, to reinforce social bonds, to share experiences and observations and jokes and stories. You're talking about who's going to do what today, whether the berries at the place you visited 3 days ago are probably ripe yet, whether anyone heard anything unusual during the night, whether the baby who was feverish yesterday seems better today. This talking, this constant social interaction, is doing something crucial for the group. It's maintaining the network of relationships that allows everyone to survive. Early human groups were not just collections of individuals who happened to be in the same place. They were tightly bonded social units, where everyone knew everyone else intimately, where people had been together since birth, where your survival depended not just on your own skills, but on your ability to cooperate, to share, to trust, and be trusted. Anthropologists sometimes call this radical interdependence, and it's hard for modern people to fully understand because we're so used to at least the idea of independence, the notion that we could, in theory, survive on our own. But early humans couldn't. An individual alone in the wilderness, even a skilled individual, would not last long. They'd be vulnerable to predators, unable to defend themselves, unable to gather enough food while also staying alert for danger, or unable to care for themselves if they got sick or injured. The group was everything. The group was survival itself. And this meant that maintaining good relationships with the group was not just pleasant or desirable, it was a matter of life and death. If you were cast out, if you became so difficult or dangerous that the group decided they couldn't have you around anymore, that was essentially a death sentence. So humans evolved to be intensely social, to be constantly aware of social dynamics, to feel deep anxiety about being excluded or rejected, to feel powerful positive emotions when we're accepted and valued. All of those feelings you have about whether people like you, whether you fit in, whether you're doing your share, those aren't modern neuroses. Those are ancient survival mechanisms, and they were absolutely accurate in the environment they evolved in. If people didn't like you, if you didn't fit in, if you didn't do your share, you were literally in danger. But here's the thing. In a group of 30 people who've known each other their entire lives, there's very little possibility of hiding who you are. Everyone knows your strengths and your weaknesses, your generosity and your selfishness, your skills and your limitations. There's no resume to embellish, no social media profile to curate, no way to present a version of yourself that's different from who you actually are day to day. This sounds terrifying from a modern perspective, but it also means there's very little anxiety about authenticity, very little of that exhausting self-monitoring we do now where we're constantly trying to manage other people's impressions of us. You are who you are, and everyone knows it, and as long as you're generally cooperative and not actively harmful, you're part of the group. There's a kind of freedom in that, a lack of pretense that most modern people never experience. The sun is higher now, the air warming, and the group is making plans in that informal, consensus-based way that small groups naturally use when there's no formal hierarchy. There are leaders, but they're not rulers in any meaningful sense. They're people who are respected, who are good at certain things, good at tracking animals, good at resolving conflicts, good at remembering where food sources are, and people tend to follow their suggestions, but there's no power to enforce obedience, no mechanism of control. If someone consistently makes bad decisions, people will simply stop listening to them, and if someone tries to be too domineering, tries to force others to do what they want, they'll face social consequences that range from mockery to exclusion. The decision today is that several of the younger men are going to scout for game, not necessarily to hunt, but to see what's around, to track the movements of herds, to gather information that will inform future hunting decisions. A group of women and older children are going to walk to a grove of trees about 2 hours away where certain nuts are ripening, and they'll spend the day there, gathering and probably eating while they gather, and they'll come back in the late afternoon with whatever they've collected. A few people are going to stay at camp, someone to watch the very young children, someone to work on repairing tools, someone who's not feeling well enough to walk far today. And you, for the sake of this story, you are going with the gathering party, because that's where the majority of the group is, and it's where you'll see the texture of daily life most clearly. You walk, and walking is something early humans were spectacularly good at. Your body is designed for it, built for covering long distances day after day without exhaustion. Your legs are long relative to your body. Your feet are arched to act as springs. Your spine is curved to absorb shock. Your ability to sweat means you can cool yourself even in heat without having to stop. You can walk all day if you need to, and you often do, and it doesn't feel like exercise in the modern sense because it's not effortful or intense. It's just movement, steady and rhythmic, at a pace that lets you talk while you walk, that lets you pay attention to your surroundings, that feels almost meditative in its repetitiveness. As you walk, you're not moving through an empty landscape. You're moving through a landscape you know intimately, that you've crossed hundreds of times where every feature has meaning. That rock formation is where someone once killed a snake. That tree is a landmark that helps you navigate to the water source. That patch of disturbed ground is where a hyena den used to be. The landscape is not wilderness in the sense of being unknown or untouched. It's home, it's familiar. And you're reading it constantly, automatically, noticing things without consciously deciding to notice them. A particular bird calling means there's water nearby. Broken branches at a certain height mean elephants have been through here. A smell on the wind means something died recently. Your awareness is panoramic, taking in everything, filtering for threats and opportunities. And this kind of attention is deeply relaxing in a way that modern focused attention is not. When we focus on a screen or a book or a specific task, we're narrowing our attention, excluding most of our sensory input, and this requires effort, creates a kind of mental tension. But the panoramic awareness of early humans is restful because it's how your brain wants to operate, how it evolved to operate. You're not trying to concentrate, you're just noticing everything, and it feels easy, feels like not working at all, even though you're taking in vastly more information than you would during a typical modern day of focused tasks. The children who are walking with the group are not being supervised in the way modern children are supervised. They're just there, moving with the adults, playing games, wandering a little ahead or a little behind, and no one is anxious about them because they're competent. They know not to wander too far. They know to pay attention. They've been learning the landscape and its dangers since they were old enough to walk, not through formal lessons, but through constant immersion, through watching and imitating and gradually being given more freedom as they demonstrate more competence. A 5-year-old can identify edible plants. A 7-year-old can track a small animal. A 10-year-old can navigate to known locations and return safely. This isn't because early human children were smarter than modern children. It's because they spent all day, every day, learning the skills they actually needed to survive. And those skills were all around them, being demonstrated constantly by everyone in the group. You reach the grove of trees and immediately the pace changes. People spread out, start examining the ground, looking up into the branches, and there's a shift from the walking mind to the gathering mind. A kind of focus that's intense but not narrow. More like a heightened awareness where you're scanning constantly for the specific signs that indicate food. The nuts you're looking for have fallen from the trees, and you're gathering them from the ground, but you have to be selective because some of them are rotten, some of them are empty, some of them have been infested with insects. You develop a feel for which ones are good, a sensitivity in your hands that tells you the weight and texture of a viable nut versus a useless one. And you're making these judgments quickly, automatically, your hands working while your mind is partly on the task and partly on the social interaction that continues all around you. People are talking, laughing, sharing observations. Someone finds a particularly good patch and calls others over. A child finds something interesting, maybe a beetle with unusual colouring, and shows it to an adult who identifies it and explains something about it. Someone starts singing just a simple melody, and others join in. And the work continues with the singing as a background, a way of maintaining rhythm and connection while everyone does their individual gathering. This is not drudgery. This is not miserable. This is what you do, what you've always done, and there's satisfaction in it. In the growing pile of nuts in your woven grass bag or bark container, in the knowledge that you're contributing to the group's food supply, in the simple pleasure of being with people you know, doing something familiar, under a sky that's bright and warm. Hours pass and you eat while you work. Some of the nuts, some berries from bushes nearby, anything that's edible and available. There's no concept of meals as distinct events separate from the rest of life. You eat when you're hungry and food is available. You eat while you walk, while you work, while you talk. Food is not scarce enough that you're constantly hungry, but it's not abundant enough that you can be wasteful, so you eat steadily, opportunistically, keeping your energy up without thinking much about it. The sun is high now, hot, and the pace of work slows. People move into shade, rest for a while, and this midday rest is another pattern that humans maintained for most of our history. You're not built to work through the hottest part of the day, especially not in a climate where midday heat can be dangerous. So you rest, you sit in the shade, you might doze a little, and you wait for the air to cool before you resume serious activity. This rest is not laziness, it's intelligent energy management. It's working with your environment instead of fighting it. During this rest, the talking continues, and this is when you might hear stories, not formal storytelling necessarily, but the kind of casual recounting of events that maintains the group's collective memory. Someone talks about the time 5 years ago when they found a beehive in a tree near here, and how they smoked out the bees and got the honey. Someone else remembers a different occasion when someone was stung badly, and their face swelled up. Someone remembers that the person who was stung was pregnant at the time, and that baby is one of the children here now, and everyone looks at that child and marvels at how much they've grown. This constant recounting of shared history is doing something important. It's maintaining the group's identity, creating a sense of continuity, teaching the younger generation about the past, reinforcing the bonds that hold everyone together, and woven into these mundane stories are other stories, older ones, stories that have been passed down for generations, stories about how things came to be, why animals behave the way they do, why the stars are arranged in certain patterns, why humans have to die. These stories are not separate from practical knowledge, they're intertwined with it, because the way early humans understood the world didn't make a sharp distinction between physical causation and mythological meaning. A story about why lions are dangerous is simultaneously a story about what lions will do, and a story about the relationship between humans and lions, and a story about the nature of power and death. The knowledge is embedded in narrative because narrative is how human memory works, how we make sense of things, how we connect information to emotion and emotion to action. The afternoon is cooler and the gathering resumes, and after a few more hours everyone's containers are full or full enough, and the decision is made to head back. The walk back is slower because people are carrying weight now, and there's less talking because everyone is a little tired. But it's a good tired. The tiredness that comes from having done something productive, from knowing that when you return to camp you'll be bringing food that people need. You can see the smoke from the fire before you see the camp itself, and that smoke is a landmark, a signal of home. And as you get closer you can see people moving around, and you feel that small lift of anticipation that comes from returning, from knowing you'll be able to put down your load, sit by the fire, share what you've gathered. The men who went to scout have already returned, and they're excited because they found tracks from a large antelope, fresh tracks, and they think they can find it tomorrow if they go early. This means there might be a hunt, which is always significant, always creates a particular energy in the group. Hunting is dangerous and difficult, requires coordination and courage and skill, and when it's successful, it provides more food at once than anything else does. But it's also unsuccessful more often than it's successful, and everyone knows this, so there's anticipation but not certainty, hope but not expectation. The evening's coming on now, the sun getting lower, the light turning golden, and this is one of the most pleasant times of day, when the heat is gone but it's not yet dark, when the work is done but there's still enough light to see clearly, when people gather around the fire and the feeling is relaxed, almost festive. The nuts that were gathered are being roasted in the edge of the fire, and people are cracking them open and eating them, and there's some meat from yesterday's hunting being distributed, just a little bit for each person, and the combination of fat and protein and starch is deeply satisfying in a way that goes beyond mere hunger, triggering something in your brain that says, yes, this is good, this is what food should be. Children are playing, running around in that way children do when they have energy to burn, and adults are watching them with half an eye, not hovering, not directing their play, just making sure no one goes too far or gets into actual danger. The babies are being passed around, held by different people, nursed by their mothers, and there's a kind of collective care happening where everyone is aware of the youngest and most vulnerable, where it's not just the mother's job to watch the baby but everyone's job, everyone's interest. This is sometimes called alloparenting, where individuals other than the biological parents help care for the young, and it's something humans do more than almost any other species. It's part of what allows human children to be so helpless for so long. They can afford a long childhood, a long period of dependency, because they're not just being cared for by two parents, but by a whole network of caregivers who are invested in their survival. As the light fades, here the fire becomes more important, and more wood is added, and the flames grow higher, and people shift their positions to stay in the warmth and the light. This is the time for talking, for stories, for the kind of extended social interaction that maintains and deepens relationships. Someone is making a new tool, carefully flaking a piece of stone to create a sharp edge, and people are watching and occasionally commenting, and there's teaching happening here even though no one is formally instructing anyone. A young person who wants to learn to make tools will watch this process dozens or hundreds of times, will eventually try it themselves with an older person nearby to correct mistakes, and gradually over years will develop the skill until they can make tools as good as anyone else's. Tool making is one of those things that looks simple, but isn't. To make a good stone tool, you have to understand the internal structure of the stone, where it will flake and where it will crack, how hard to strike it and at what angle, how to shape it gradually into the form you need. This knowledge takes years to acquire, and it's entirely manual, kinesthetic knowledge. Knowledge that lives in your hands and your eyes and your intuition, not knowledge that can be easily put into words. You can't learn it from a book or a video. You can only learn it by doing it over and over, while someone who already knows how watches and guides you. This is true of most of the skills that kept early humans alive: tracking, hunting, gathering, making cordage, making fire, processing hides, finding water. They're all skills that require long apprenticeships, that require being embedded in a community of people who already have those skills and can demonstrate them. But here's what's important: the learning is not separate from life. There's no school, no time set aside specifically for education. Learning happens constantly, embedded in everyday activities, and because of this, it doesn't feel like learning in the modern sense. It's just what you do, what everyone does. Children learn by watching and imitating and gradually participating in adult activities, and the adults teach by doing what they do and allowing children to be present, to try things, to make mistakes in situations where the stakes are low enough that mistakes are tolerable. By the time you're an adult, you've spent approximately 10,000 hours observing and practicing the core survival skills of your culture, and you're competent, not because you're specially gifted, but because that's what 10,000 hours of embedded learning produces. The stars are out now, brilliant and overwhelming, and someone points out a constellation, tells the story associated with it. And everyone who's heard the story before still listens because the point is not novelty. The point is the shared experience, the reinforcement of common knowledge, the pleasure of hearing a familiar story told well. The moon is rising, nearly full, and the landscape around you is visible in that strange colourless way that moonlight creates, where you can see shapes and movements, but not details. And this moonlight is significant because it changes what's possible. On a night like this, people might stay up later, might walk between camps if there's a reason to, might hunt certain animals that are more active at night. The moon is not just beautiful, it's functional, part of the environment you navigate, part of the rhythm of the month. A baby starts crying, that particular insistent cry that means hunger, and the mother shifts, adjusts her position, and begins nursing. And this is happening completely casually, without comment or attention, because it's one of the most normal things there is. Breastfeeding continues for years in early human groups, often until the child is 3 or 4 years old, and this has several effects. It provides continued nutrition for the child, which is important because weaning to the available foods is difficult and dangerous. More children die during the weaning process than at almost any other time. It also acts as a fairly effective form of birth control, spacing births naturally by suppressing ovulation while the mother is nursing frequently. This means that women in hunter-gatherer societies typically have babies every 3 to 4 years, not every year, which is crucial because a woman simply cannot carry and care for 2 entirely helpless infants at the same time, while also moving with the group and doing the work necessary for survival. The spacing of children is one of those things that's invisible in the archaeological record, but enormously important for understanding early human life. Modern people, especially those who've never experienced life without contraception, tend to assume that women in the past just had babies constantly until they died, but this isn't true. Hunter-gatherer women have significantly fewer children than agricultural women, and the children they do have are more likely to survive because they receive more care, more attention, more resources. The demographic transition from low population to high population doesn't happen until agriculture, and it happens not because people suddenly want more children, but because the lifestyle changes that come with agriculture, settlement, different diets, different work patterns, change the biological and social factors that naturally space births. Someone is making music now, not with an instrument, but with their voice. A series of rhythmic sounds, and someone else is clapping, and a few people are moving, something that's not quite dancing but is rhythmic movement, a physical expression of the patterns in the sounds. Music and rhythm are human universals, found in every culture ever studied, and they're clearly ancient, clearly something that was part of human life long before recorded history. Why? Because rhythm synchronizes groups. Each creates a shared physiological state, reinforces social bonds in a way that goes deeper than language. When you're moving to the same rhythm as the people around you, your heartbeats begin to synchronize, your breathing patterns align, and you feel connected in a visceral, bodily way that creates trust and cooperation. Music is not entertainment, or not just entertainment. It's social technology, a way of making groups cohere, and it's been doing that job for tens of thousands of years. The fire is lower now, and people are starting to settle down for the night, moving to their sleeping areas, lying down on hides or grass, children curling up next to parents, people arranging themselves in that close proximity that conserves warmth and provides security. There's no dramatic transition from wakefulness to sleep, no brushing of teeth or changing into pajamas or any of the other rituals modern people use to mark the boundary between day and night. You just lie down when you're tired, pull your covering over you if the night's cold, and let sleep come when it comes. But before you sleep, there's this moment of lying in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night, and this is where we need to slow down and really pay attention, because this experience, this particular configuration of sensory input and psychological state, is something your brain is deeply calibrated for. Something that still shapes how you feel and what you need, even though you probably never experience it in its pure form anymore. You're lying down, and you're warm enough, and you can hear the fire crackling, which is a safe sound, a sound that means protection. You can hear other people breathing, shifting, occasionally murmuring, and these sounds are also safe sounds, sounds that mean you're not alone, that the group is here, that if anything dangerous approached during the night, someone would notice, someone would alert everyone else. You can hear the night sounds of animals in the distance, insects, birds, maybe a predator calling far away, and these sounds are part of the baseline, the normal acoustic environment, and as long as they continue in their usual patterns, they mean everything is normal, everything is safe. Your eyes are open or closed, and it doesn't matter much because it's dark enough that you can't see detail either way. And your vision is not your primary sense right now. Your hearing is what's tracking the environment, monitoring for anything that requires attention, and because nothing requires attention, because everything is signaling safety, your nervous system is shifting into the mode that allows sleep, that parasympathetic state where your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, your muscles relax, your mind begins to drift. This is the state that modern sleep researchers sometimes call ancestral sleep environment, and it's characterized by several specific factors: darkness, the presence of others, the sound of fire, the absence of artificial stimulation, a sense of physical safety that's confirmed by sensory input, and a gradual transition into sleep rather than an abrupt one. When all of these factors are present, sleep comes easily, naturally, without effort or anxiety, and the sleep itself is deep and restorative in a way that modern sleep often isn't. Most modern people don't sleep in anything like this environment. We sleep alone or with just one other person, in rooms that are too quiet or filled with artificial sounds, behind locked doors that make us physically safer, but also cut us off from the sensory confirmation of safety that our nervous systems evolved to rely on. We transition into sleep abruptly, yet often while looking at screens that emit blue light specifically designed to suppress the production of melatonin, the hormone that makes us sleepy. We expect to fall asleep instantly and sleep solidly for 8 hours without waking, and when this doesn't happen, we think something is wrong with us. We develop anxiety about sleep, which makes sleep harder, which increases the anxiety. But you, lying here in this camp tens of thousands of years ago, have none of these problems. You're not worried about whether you'll sleep. You're just lying down and sleep is coming, and if you wake in the middle of the night, that's fine, that's normal. You'll just lie there for a while and then drift back down, and if you need to get up to urinate or check on a child or add wood to the fire, you'll do that and then come back to sleep, and none of it is stressful or problematic because this is just what nights are like, what they've always been like. Your dreams, when they come, are vivid and strange, full of the images and concerns and memories of the day, full of animals and landscapes and people, and you don't have a framework for understanding dreams as purely neurological events, as your brain processing and consolidating memories. Instead, dreams are experiences, meaningful experiences, possibly messages, possibly visions of things that are real in some dimension you can't access while awake. Some dreams are clearly connected to waking life, and clearly about things that happened or might happen, but others are bizarre, surreal, following a logic that makes sense in the dream but dissolves in the light of day. These bizarre dreams might be communications from spirits, from ancestors, from the landscape itself, and there are people in the group who are considered particularly good at interpreting dreams, at understanding what they mean, what they're warning about, what they're instructing. This might sound like superstition from a modern perspective, but consider, dreams do contain information. They contain information about your emotional state, your concerns, your unresolved problems, and sometimes they contain insights that your conscious mind hasn't articulated yet. The framework for understanding this information is different, the explanation is different, but the function, paying attention to dreams, taking them seriously, using them as a source of insight, is not irrational. It's a different way of accessing the same underlying psychological processes. The night passes and you drift in and out of sleep, and when you're awake, you might think about things, about the day that passed, about the day that's coming, about people, about that antelope the men are going to try to track tomorrow. Your thoughts don't have the driven, anxious quality that modern nighttime thinking often has, because you're not worried about all the things you need to do, nor all the obligations and deadlines and responsibilities. Your life is not structured by shoulds and musts. It's structured by what is, by what needs to happen for survival and comfort, and those needs are immediate and solvable, and don't extend endlessly into an uncertain future. There's a kind of psychological freedom in this that's hard to describe. Your concerns are real and immediate. Is there enough food? Is everyone healthy? Are we safe from predators? But they're not abstract or existential. You're not worried about your career or your retirement or your identity, or whether you're living a meaningful life. You're living life directly, and the meaning is embedded in the living itself, in the relationships and the daily activities and the simple fact of continuing to exist, along with everyone else you know. Morning comes again, that gradual lightening, and the whole cycle begins again. Yeah, and this is the pattern. Days that are mostly similar, mostly predictable, but with enough variation, enough moments of interest or challenge or discovery that life is not boring. Today there might be a hunt. Tomorrow there might be a decision to move camp. Next week someone might come from another group with news or wanting to trade or looking for a partner. But the basic rhythm remains constant. Wake, eat, work, eat, rest, work, eat, socialize, sleep, wake, and repeat day after day, season after season, year after year, generation after generation. This is where we need to zoom out for a moment and consider the sheer scale of this lifestyle, the amount of time humans live this way. Anatomically, modern humans emerged around 200,000 years ago. Agriculture was invented around 10,000 years ago. That means that for roughly 190,000 years, 95% of our existence as a species, humans lived as hunter-gatherers. Everything about your body, everything about your brain, everything about your emotional and social instincts was shaped by that 190,000-year period. The last 10,000 years, the period of agriculture and cities and everything we think of as civilization, is a tiny fraction of our history, far too short for significant evolutionary change in our basic biology or psychology. This is why you feel the way you feel. This is why certain things feel good and others feel bad, why some situations create stress and others create calm, why your body and mind respond to the world in ways that sometimes seem maladaptive in modern life, but made perfect sense for the vast majority of human history. You're not designed for the modern world. You're designed for the world we've been exploring. The world of small groups and face-to-face relationships and direct engagement with the natural environment and physical challenges that have clear, immediate solutions. When you feel anxious in a crowd of strangers, that's not a malfunction. Your brain is correctly identifying a situation, being surrounded by unknown people, that would have been genuinely dangerous for most of human history. When you feel lonely, even though you're connected to hundreds of people online, that's not irrational. Your brain doesn't register digital connection as real connection, because for all of human history until about 5 minutes ago, connection meant physical presence, meant being able to see and hear and touch the people you were connected to. When you feel a deep sense of peace while sitting by a fire or walking in nature, that's not poetic fancy. That's your nervous system recognizing the environment it was built for, the environment where it knows how to assess safety, where the inputs make sense. The mismatch between our evolved psychology and our current environment is the source of an enormous amount of modern suffering, and understanding this doesn't fix it, but it does provide some context, some compassion for yourself when you struggle with things that seem like they should be easy. You're not broken. You're a hunter-gatherer living in a world that didn't exist when your brain was being designed, and you're doing your best to adapt to circumstances that are genuinely unprecedented in human history. But let's return to the day, because there's more to see, more to understand about how early humans actually spent their time. The men are preparing for the hunt, and this is a process that involves practical preparation, but also psychological preparation, a shift into a different mode of being. Hunting is dangerous. You're going after an animal that is strong and fast, that has its own desire to live, that will fight or flee, and the outcome is uncertain. You might be injured, you might fail, but if you succeed, you'll bring back enough meat to feed the group for days, and that success brings status, brings respect, reinforces your position in the social hierarchy. The social dynamics around hunting are complex. In most hunter-gatherer societies, meat is shared widely, not just kept by the hunter who killed the animal, and this sharing is enforced by strong social norms. If you try to hoard meat, if you refuse to share, you'll face social sanctions ranging from mockery to exclusion, and these sanctions are effective because you can't survive without the group. So hunting is simultaneously an individual display of skill and communal benefit, and the hunters gain prestige not by keeping the meat, but by being the ones who provide it, by being generous, by being the people others can rely on. The hunting party leaves, and you're not with them because we're staying with the larger pattern of daily life, which for most people most of the time does not involve hunting. Instead, today, you're staying relatively close to camp, working on tasks that need doing, and this gives us a chance to see another aspect of early human life, which is the enormous amount of time spent on what we might call maintenance activities, the tasks that don't directly produce food, but that make food production possible and that keep the group functioning. Someone is making cordage, twisting plant fibers together to create string, and this task is time-consuming and repetitive but essential, because cordage is needed for everything, for nets, for bags, for attaching projectile points to shafts, for making snares, for binding shelters together. The process requires finding the right plants, harvesting them, processing them to extract the fibers, and then twisting those fibers with exactly the right tension so the cord is strong but not brittle. It takes hours to make even a short length of good cordage, and you go through cordage constantly, so someone is almost always making it, hands busy with the repetitive motion, while their mind is free to think or talk or listen to others. Someone else is working on a hide, scraping away the fat and tissue that cling to the inside, working the hide to keep it supple so it can be used for clothing or shelter or containers. This is hard physical work, repetitive and exhausting, and it smells bad, and it takes days to process a single hide properly, but the result is a material that's incredibly versatile and valuable. Leather is one of those substances that humans used for thousands of years before we developed any substitute, and even now, with all our synthetic materials, leather remains valuable because its combination of properties, flexible but strong, breathable but weather-resistant, durable but workable, is hard to replicate. Children are playing, but they're playing at adult activities. They're making small versions of tools, practicing throwing, tracking each other, playing games that involve hiding and seeking and coordinating in groups. This play is not separate from education. It is education. The way young humans practice the skills they'll need as adults, the way they develop coordination and cooperation, and all the subtle social skills that make group living work. No one is directing this play, organizing it, creating lesson plans. The children are doing it themselves because play is intrinsically motivated, because young humans and young primates in general have a drive to practice adult behaviors, to test themselves, to gradually expand their competence. And there's a lot of time for this play, a lot of time for what we might call leisure, because hunter-gatherer life, despite its challenges, is not a constant, desperate struggle. Studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer groups show that adults typically work, meaning engage in activities directly related to food production and essential maintenance, somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a day. The rest of the time is spent in rest, socializing, play, artistic activities, and other things that modern people would classify as leisure. This is dramatically less work than agricultural peoples do, less than industrial peoples do, less than most modern people do. This is one of those facts that surprises people, because we have this deep cultural narrative that life in the past was harder than life now, that technology has freed us from drudgery, that progress means less work. But the reality is that hunter-gatherers worked less than almost any humans who came after them. Agriculture increased work hours dramatically because farming requires constant effort, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing, protecting crops from pests and animals. Industrial life increased work hours further, and even now, with all our labour-saving devices, most people work 40 or more hours a week, plus time for commuting, plus time for all the household tasks that still need doing. Why did humans adopt agriculture if it meant more work? That's a question that puzzled anthropologists for a long time, and the answer seems to be that they didn't do it by choice, not in the sense of making a rational decision to change lifestyles. Instead, agriculture emerged gradually in situations where population pressure or climate change made the hunter-gatherer lifestyle less viable. And once you start farming, you're locked in because farming supports higher population densities. And higher populations require more farming, And you can't go back to hunting and gathering because there are too many people for the land to support that way. Agriculture is a trap, in a sense, a ratchet that only moves in one direction, and once humans fell into it, there was no climbing back out. But we're not there yet. We're still in the long, long period before agriculture, and right now, in this camp, people are working for a few hours and then resting for a few hours. And the pace of life is determined by the natural rhythms of hunger and energy and daylight, not by clocks or schedules or bosses. You work when something needs doing and you have the energy to do it. You rest when you're tired. You eat when you're hungry. You sleep when you're sleepy. This sounds simple, almost childlike, but it's actually a sophisticated alignment with your body's natural regulatory systems, and it's something most modern people have almost entirely lost. We override our hunger signals because it's not lunchtime yet, or because we're trying to lose weight, or because we're too busy. We override our tiredness because there's more work to do, or because we've been taught that sleeping during the day is lazy, or because we're trying to conform to someone else's schedule. We override our body's need for movement because we have to sit in meetings or at desks. And then we override our body's need for rest because we've been sitting all day and we're supposed to exercise. We live in constant low-level conflict with our own biology, constantly trying to force our bodies to do what our schedules require rather than what our bodies need. And this conflict is exhausting in a way that's hard to even recognize because it's so constant, so normalized. But here, now, in this camp, there is no conflict. Your body tells you what it needs, and you do that thing. And if you're tired in the middle of the day, you rest and no one judges you because everyone else does the same thing. If you're hungry, you eat something. And if nothing is immediately available, you go find something, or you wait until the next time food is being shared, and it's not stressful because you're not running on empty, not desperately hungry, just ready to eat when food comes. Your body and your life are aligned, moving together instead of fighting each other. And the result is a kind of ease, a lack of internal friction that most modern people only experience on vacation, if then. The hunters return in the late afternoon, and they've succeeded. They've killed an antelope, a good-sized one, and they've butchered it in the field and carried back the meat and the hide and the useful parts, and there's immediate excitement in the camp. This is a big event, a success that everyone will benefit from, and the mood shifts into something celebratory. The meat is distributed according to complex social rules that everyone understands. Rules about who gets which parts, rules that ensure everyone gets something, but that also recognize the contribution of the hunters, the kinship relationships between people, the obligations created by past sharing. The distribution of meat is one of the most socially complex activities in hunter-gatherer life, because meat is valuable, high in protein and fat, relatively rare, intensely desired. And how it's shared reveals and reinforces the entire social structure of the group. The person who killed the animal doesn't get the biggest share. In fact, in many hunter-gatherer societies, they might get one of the smaller shares, because giving away meat is how you gain status and everyone knows who killed it. Everyone knows you're the source of this bounty, and your generosity is noted and remembered, and will be reciprocated in the future. Some of the meat is eaten immediately, roasted over the fire, and there's a feast atmosphere. People eating more than they usually would, savouring the fat and protein, talking about the hunt, hearing the story of how it happened, who did what the animal did, the moments of tension and success. The story's told multiple times, each hunter adding their perspective, and the story's not just entertainment, it's education. Teaching the younger people who are listening how hunts work. What to expect, what strategies succeed, what dangers to watch for. The rest of the meat is prepared for storage, cut into strips and hung near the fire to smoke and dry, or packed into containers with leaves, or buried in a cool spot. Meat preservation is always imperfect, always a race against rot, especially in warm climates, so there's a tension between eating as much as possible while it's fresh and trying to make it last as long as possible. The group will eat well for several days, and then the meat will be gone, and they'll go back to the baseline diet of gathered foods, and eventually the hunters will try again, and sometimes they'll succeed, and sometimes they won't, and that's just the rhythm of it. The unreliable abundance of hunting balanced against the reliable adequacy of gathering. As the meat is being prepared and shared, people are also working with the hide and the sinews and the bones, because nothing is wasted. The hide will be processed into leather. The sinews will be dried and split into threads for sewing. The bones will be cracked open for marrow, which is rich and delicious, and then the bones themselves might be made into tools or ornaments. The stomach and intestines, carefully cleaned, can be used as containers or for cordage. Even the hooves and horns have uses. When you kill an animal, you use everything you possibly can because killing is difficult and dangerous, and the animal's life is being taken. And there's a kind of respect in using everything, in making sure that death has meaning, has purpose. This attitude toward animals is complex and worth pausing on, because it's very different from both modern meat consumption and modern animal rights perspectives. Early humans killed animals and ate them without guilt or moral conflict because that's what survival required, and there was no alternative. But they also recognized animals as beings, as living things with their own existence and purpose, and there was ritual and respect involved in hunting, acknowledgement that you were taking a life, gratitude for the food the animal's death provided. This is not sentimentality. You're not keeping the animal as a pet or refusing to eat it, but you're also not treating it as a mere object, a thing that exists only for human use. This dual consciousness, recognizing animals as both separate beings and as food sources, is something that most modern people don't have to maintain because we're so removed from the actual killing. We eat meat that comes in packages that doesn't look like an animal, and we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance about the process that turned a living creature into the food on our plate. Or we refuse to eat meat at all and focus on the rights and suffering of animals, which is ethically consistent but also a luxury of abundance, of having enough other food options that we can afford to exclude an entire category. Early humans didn't have that luxury. They ate what they could get, and what they could get included animals, and they made peace with that necessity in ways that involved recognition and respect rather than denial or guilt. The evening's coming on, and the feast continues, and people are full in a way they're not always full. That deep satisfaction of having eaten plenty of rich food, and the mood is relaxed and happy. Someone has made a new tool, a beautiful projectile point, symmetrical and sharp, and it's being passed around and admired, and this is one of those moments where you can see that humans are not just practical. We don't just make things that work. We make things that are beautiful, that have aesthetic qualities beyond their function. That projectile point is more symmetrical than it needs to be, more finely worked than purely functional necessity would require, and the maker took extra time to make it that way because humans care about beauty, because we derive satisfaction from creating beautiful objects, because making something beautiful and then sharing it with others is one of the ways we connect, one of the ways we express something about ourselves. Art is not a luxury that emerges after basic survival needs are met. Art is part of survival, part of what makes us human, yet a part of how we create meaning and connection and identity. The oldest known art objects, beads made from shells, pieces of ochre with carved patterns, cave paintings, are tens of thousands of years old, dating from well within the hunter-gatherer period, created by people who had all the same survival challenges as any other early humans, but who still took time to make things that were beautiful, that had no immediate practical function, but that mattered nonetheless. The fire is high now. Fed with wood from the dry branches people have been collecting over the past few days, and the light and warmth create a circle of safety and comfort in the darkness, and this is the time for the kind of deep, social interaction that maintains the group's cohesion. People are grooming each other, checking for ticks and thorns, working through hair with their fingers, and this grooming is not just practical. It's social bonding, the physical contact that releases oxytocin and creates feelings of trust and connection, the same behavior that primates have been using for millions of years to maintain social relationships. Someone is having a conflict with someone else, something minor, some slight or misunderstanding, and it's being worked out verbally, with others occasionally weighing in, mediating, pointing out perspectives. And this kind of immediate conflict resolution is essential, because you can't avoid people you're angry with when you live in a group of 30 people who are together all the time. You have to work it out, have to find a way to restore the relationship, because the alternative, ongoing hostility, factions, breakdown of cooperation, is too dangerous for everyone. So conflicts are addressed directly, usually fairly quickly, and the process is public, with the group's consensus helping to guide people toward resolution. This public, immediate conflict resolution is actually much healthier than the way many modern people handle conflict, which often involves avoidance, resentment building over time, private grievances that never get aired or resolved. In small-scale societies, you can't afford to avoid conflict because it doesn't go away. It just festers and gets worse. So you learn to address things directly, to say what's bothering you, to listen to the other person's perspective, to find solutions that allow everyone to continue living and working together. It's not always pleasant, but it works, and it prevents the kind of long-term toxic relationships that modern people sometimes maintain for years, trapped by social or economic circumstances but unable or unwilling to actually resolve the underlying issues. A baby is fussy, crying in that way that means discomfort but not acute distress. And the mother is trying different things, nursing, shifting position, checking to see if the baby needs cleaning. And other women are offering advice, offering to hold the baby. And this collective attention to child rearing is another thing that's been lost in modern nuclear families, where one or two parents are expected to handle all the childcare all the time with minimal support. In early human groups, children were cared for by a whole network of people, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, older siblings, unrelated adults who were part of the group. And this distribution of care meant that no single person was overwhelmed. No one was trying to meet all of a child's needs all the time, while also meeting their own needs. Modern parents, especially mothers, often experience intense isolation and exhaustion because they are trying to provide the level of care that used to be distributed among many people, and they're doing it while also trying to work and maintain a household and meet all the other demands of modern life, and it's not sustainable. The saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," is not just a nice sentiment, it's a description of how human child rearing actually evolved to work, and when we try to do it differently, when we isolate parents and tell them they should be able to handle everything on their own, we're setting them up for failure and stress and resentment. The night is deep now, and people are settling down again, the cycle repeating, and as they lie down to sleep there's that same sense of safety, of being surrounded by the familiar, of being part of something larger than themselves, and this belonging, this being part of a group where everyone knows you and needs you, and where you know and need everyone else, is one of the most fundamental human needs, as important as food or shelter or any physical requirement. Humans are not solitary creatures. We did not evolve to be independent or self-sufficient. We evolved to be interdependent, to be part of tightly bonded groups where our survival and well-being are linked to the survival and well-being of everyone else. Modern culture, especially in Western industrialized societies, places enormous emphasis on independence, on being self-sufficient, on not needing others, and this creates a fundamental conflict with our evolved psychology. We're told that needing people is weakness, that we should be able to handle everything ourselves, that asking for help is failure, and so we isolate ourselves. We hide our struggles, we pretend we're fine when we're not, and we wonder why we feel so lonely, why we feel so overwhelmed, why modern life feels so hard, even though objectively we have more resources and more comfort than any humans in history. The answer is that we're missing the thing that made all those resources and comforts bearable, which is community, connection, belonging, the sense of being part of something larger than ourselves, where people care about us, not because of what we achieve or how we perform, but simply because we're part of the group, because our presence matters, because we belong. Early humans had this. They had it automatically, inevitably, built into the structure of daily life. We have to consciously create it, have to fight against social structures that pull us apart, have to deliberately build and maintain connections that used to be simply given, and many people never manage it, spend their whole lives feeling fundamentally alone even when surrounded by other people. Days pass in the same rhythm: wake, eat, work, rest, eat, socialize, sleep. And each day is mostly like the others, but there are variations, moments that stand out. One day someone finds a beehive, and there's the dangerous, exciting work of smoking out the bees and extracting the honey, and everyone eats honey until they're sick of sweetness, and people talk about it for days afterward. One day a child who's been learning to make fire finally succeeds on their own, gets the ember to catch without help, and there's praise and celebration because this is a milestone, a sign that the child is becoming competent, becoming someone who can contribute to the group's survival. One day rain comes, heavy rain that lasts for hours, and everyone huddles under whatever shelter they have, and the work of the day is postponed, and there's a different kind of time, a suspended time where you just wait for the weather to pass, and the enforced rest is somehow pleasant, even though you're damp and uncomfortable. One day there's a death. An older person, someone who's been declining for a while, doesn't wake up one morning, and there's grief, genuine grief, because this person was known and loved. This was part of the group for their entire life, and their absence is a hole in the social fabric that everyone feels. The body is prepared according to the group's customs, buried, or placed in a tree, or cremated, whatever the tradition is, and there's ritual, ceremony, ways of marking the transition from life to death, ways of acknowledging the loss, ways of helping the group process the grief together rather than each person having to carry it alone. And death is more present in early human life than it is in modern life, more visible, more immediate. People die of injuries, of infections, of complications from childbirth, of diseases that would be easily treatable now, and they die younger on average, and everyone is familiar with death, has experienced it multiple times, has lost children, siblings, parents, friends. But this doesn't mean life is cheap, or that death is met with indifference. The grief is real. The loss matters. People remember the dead, tell stories about them, keep their memory alive in the collective memory of the group. And there's something about this intimacy with death, this inability to avoid or deny it, that creates a different relationship with life. When you know that death is always near, that you or someone you love could die suddenly from causes beyond anyone's control, you don't take life for granted in the same way. You're present with the people you love because they might not be here tomorrow. You pay attention to the moments of joy and connection because you know they're finite. You don't defer living. Don't spend years working towards some future goal while ignoring the present, because the future is not guaranteed, and the present is all you reliably have. Modern people, especially in developed countries where death has been pushed to the margins, where it mostly happens in hospitals away from daily life, where we can go years without experiencing the death of someone close to us, have a very different relationship with time. We act as if we have unlimited amounts of it, as if there will always be time later to do the things we really want to do, to connect with the people we really care about, and we spend enormous portions of our lives doing things we don't want to do in service of some imagined future that may never come. Early humans couldn't afford that kind of deferral. They lived now because now was what they had, and this presence, this immediacy, created a different quality of experience, a different way of being in the world. Seasons change, and the group's activities change with them. If we're in a temperate region, winter means different food sources, different challenges, possibly moving to a different location that offers better shelter or more accessible water. If we're in a tropical region, the shift is between wet season and dry season, times of abundance and times of scarcity, and the group's movements and activities track these changes, following the patterns of available resources. People know these patterns intimately, know where to be and when, know what foods appear in which season, know how to prepare for times of scarcity by storing food or moving to areas where food is more reliably available. This knowledge is not written down. It's carried in memory, in stories, and in the collective knowledge of the group, and it's remarkably detailed and accurate. Studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer groups show that their ecological knowledge, their understanding of plants, animals, weather patterns, seasonal changes, geographic features, is often more detailed and more accurate than that of trained ecologists studying the same environment. This makes sense when you consider that these are people whose survival depends on that knowledge, who've been learning it from infancy, who've spent tens of thousands of hours observing and interacting with their environment, and whose ancestors have been accumulating and refining that knowledge for generations. This kind of knowledge is sometimes called traditional ecological knowledge, and it's increasingly recognized as valuable by modern scientists because it contains information that scientific study might take decades to discover, information about rare events, about long-term patterns, about the subtle interconnections between different species and processes. But traditional ecological knowledge is also disappearing rapidly as indigenous peoples are displaced or assimilated, as lifestyles change, as the chain of transmission from one generation to the next is broken. When an elder who carries traditional knowledge dies without passing it on, humanity loses something irreplaceable, a library's worth of information about how to live in a specific place, how to read the land, how to survive in harmony with the ecosystem rather than in conflict with it. But we're still here, still in this time when the knowledge is intact, when everyone knows what they need to know, and the rhythm of the year is a rhythm everyone understands. The group is preparing to move to a new camp, not far but far enough that it will take most of a day to walk there, and this move is happening because the resources around the current camp are getting depleted. The easily accessible firewood is running low, the nearby water source is less convenient now that the dry season is advancing, and it's time to shift to a new location that offers better conditions. Moving is a big task, but not a difficult one, because there's not much to move. You don't have furniture or appliances or closets full of clothes. You have the tools you use regularly, the containers for food and water, the hides or mats you sleep on, and that's about it. Like everything you own can be carried, either on your back or in your hands, and the entire group's possessions would fit in a small room. This seems like poverty from a modern perspective, but it's not experienced as poverty, because you don't need more than what you have. More possessions would just be burden, weight to carry, things to keep track of, and they wouldn't improve your life in any meaningful way because your needs are being met by what you have and by your skills and knowledge and relationships. There's a kind of freedom in this lack of possessions that modern people sometimes glimpse when they deliberately simplify, when they get rid of excess belongings and feel lighter, less burdened. But for early humans, it's not a deliberate choice or a philosophical stance. It's just reality. The natural consequence of a mobile lifestyle where everything you own has to be carried and where the resources to make things are limited enough that you only make what you actually need. The walk to the new camp is long but pleasant, everyone moving together at a pace that allows talking, allows children to explore a bit, allows frequent stops to rest or to gather food along the way. You're following a route that's been used before, not a path exactly, but a general direction that takes you past known landmarks, through terrain that's familiar, and people are commenting on changes, noting where a tree has fallen, or where water is pooling, or where animals have been. The landscape is a book that you're constantly reading, constantly updating your knowledge of, and every walk is an opportunity to learn something new, to notice something that might be useful in the future. You arrive at the new camp in the late afternoon, and people immediately start setting up shelters, gathering firewood, establishing the fire, all the tasks that need to happen before dark. The new location has been used before. There are stones from previous firings, signs of previous habitation, and it's been chosen because it offers good shelter, access to water, proximity to food sources and visibility, the ability to see approaching danger. The camp is not in the densest part of the forest, and not in the most open part of the grassland, but in the transition zone, where you have access to the resources of both environments and where you're not too exposed or too hidden. Within a few hours, the new camp is functional, looking much like the old camp, and life continues without disruption. This is something early humans were extraordinarily good at, adapting to new locations, establishing what they needed quickly, and was maintaining the social and practical structures of life regardless of where they were physically. The group is the constant, the location is variable, and as long as the group is intact, as long as the relationships and the shared knowledge and the patterns of cooperation are maintained, the specific place you're sleeping doesn't matter all that much. Weeks pass, months pass, and we're moving through time now, not day by day, but in longer rhythms. And you're seeing how the pattern of life repeats, but also how it develops, how children grow and learn, how people age, how the group composition changes as babies are born and elders die, and occasionally people leave to join other groups, or people from other groups join yours. These movements between groups are important because they prevent inbreeding, because they share knowledge and genetic diversity, because they maintain the larger network of relationships that extends beyond your immediate group to include several other groups who you encounter periodically, who you have complex relationships with that include elements of alliance, competition, trade, and intermarriage. These periodic encounters with other groups are significant events, and they're approached with a mixture of excitement and caution. Other humans are the most dangerous thing in your environment, more dangerous than any predator, more capable of causing harm, but also the most potentially beneficial, the source of new relationships, new knowledge, new genetic diversity, new stories and songs and ideas. The encounters are ritualized, approached carefully with protocols that allow both groups to assess each other's intentions, to establish whether this meeting will be friendly or hostile, to negotiate the terms of interaction. Most of the time, the encounters are friendly or at least neutral. People meet, share food, exchange information about where resources are available, where dangers have been seen, what's happening in the region. Young people eye each other, assessing potential partners, and sometimes relationships form that lead to someone moving from one group to another. Older people share knowledge, compare experiences, update each other on births and deaths and significant events. Children play together, and these play relationships are the foundation of the larger network, the beginning of connections that might matter decades later. But sometimes encounters are hostile. Sometimes there's competition over resources, over territory, over some insult or injury from a previous encounter. Sometimes violence happens, people are killed, and this violence is remembered, creates ongoing tensions between groups, can lead to cycles of revenge and counter-revenge that last for generations. Well, early human life was not entirely peaceful. Violence was part of the reality, usually small-scale violence between individuals or small groups rather than organized warfare, but real and dangerous nonetheless. The archaeological record shows evidence of violent death, skeletons with unhealed injuries from weapons, mass burials suggesting conflict, and contemporary hunter-gatherer societies include violence as part of their reality, though the frequency and intensity vary widely depending on population density, resource availability, and cultural patterns. This is one of those areas where there's a lot of political and ideological debate about the nature of humanity, about whether we're naturally peaceful or naturally violent, and the honest answer is that we're both, or neither, or it depends. Humans are capable of extraordinary cooperation and extraordinary violence, of deep empathy and shocking cruelty, and which potential gets expressed depends on circumstances, on culture, on individual personality, on the specific situation. Early humans cooperated intensely within their groups because survival required it, and they were also capable of viewing outsiders as threats, as competitors, as less than fully human, and treating them accordingly. The groups you have ongoing relationships with, the groups you periodically encounter and trade with and intermarry with, are part of your extended social network, and this network might include a few hundred people total across several groups. This is everyone you know, everyone whose existence you're aware of, and beyond this network there are other humans somewhere, but they're abstract, not real to you in any immediate sense. Your world is small in terms of the number of people in it, even though it's geographically large, and this smallness creates a very different kind of society than what we have now, where we're aware of billions of people, where we're exposed to information about events and people all over the world, where the scale of human society is so vast that it's impossible to comprehend as anything other than an abstraction. In a small-scale society, everyone is a person, an individual you know or could potentially know. There are no masses, no crowds, no anonymous others. Everyone matters because everyone is known. And this creates a kind of intimacy and accountability that's impossible in large-scale society. You can't be cruel to someone and then never see them again. You can't cheat someone without everyone knowing about it. You can't hide who you are because everyone sees you every day. This has constraints, less privacy, less freedom to reinvent yourself, more pressure to conform to group norms. But it also has benefits. The benefit of being truly known, of having your existence matter to others, of being part of a web of relationships where you're not replaceable, where you specifically are needed and valued. Let's shift now to talk about some of the specifics of early human biology and behavior, the things about your body and your mind that were shaped by this lifestyle, because understanding these things helps explain why you are the way you are, why certain modern conditions cause problems, why your body and brain sometimes seem poorly suited to the world you're living in. Start with diet. Early humans ate an enormously varied diet, probably more varied than any diet consumed by people now, including wild game, fish, insects, birds, eggs, nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, roots, tubers, leafy greens, honey, and probably dozens of other food items depending on location and season. This variety meant that they were getting a wide range of nutrients, and they were not getting large quantities of any single food except occasionally during times of abundance. There was no such thing as eating the same thing every day, no meal that was standardized or repeated constantly. The human digestive system reflects this variability. We're omnivores, able to extract nutrition from both plant and animal sources, and we have the ability to adapt to a fairly wide range of diets depending on what's available. But we're not optimized for any single diet. We're optimized for variety, for switching between food sources, for being flexible and opportunistic. This is why extreme diets that rely heavily on a single food, or that exclude entire categories of food, often cause problems. Your body is expecting variety and becomes confused when it doesn't get it. The macronutrient balance of the early human diet was also different from most modern diets. Fat was highly valued and sought after because it's calorie-dense and essential for brain function and hormone production. Yeah, and early humans would often preferentially eat the fattiest parts of an animal, would seek out fatty foods like nuts and seeds, would go to great effort to get honey and bone marrow and brain tissue, all of which are high in fat. Carbohydrates came primarily from fruits and roots and tubers, which are complex carbohydrates with fiber, not the refined carbohydrates that dominate modern diets. Protein came from meat and fish and insects, and was probably not consumed in the enormous quantities that modern high-protein diets recommend, because meat was not available constantly, and because eating too much protein without enough fat or carbohydrates can cause problems. There's a condition called rabbit starvation, or protein poisoning, that happens when people try to survive on lean meat alone. The timing of eating was also different. There were no 3 meals a day at scheduled times. There was eating when food was available, which might mean grazing throughout the day on gathered foods, might mean a feast when a hunt was successful, might mean periods of relative scarcity where you are hungry more often and eating less. Your body is designed to handle this variability, has mechanisms for storing energy when food is abundant and accessing those stores when food is scarce. And these mechanisms get confused by the modern pattern of constant food availability, of never being truly hungry. You start sort of eating at scheduled times whether you're hungry or not. Fasting, or periods without food, was a normal part of early human life, and your body has elaborate systems for managing these periods, shifting to fat metabolism, maintaining blood sugar through gluconeogenesis, preserving muscle mass through hormonal changes. These systems still work, which is why intermittent fasting has become popular as a health intervention. But most modern people never trigger them because they're eating constantly, and the metabolic flexibility that was normal for early humans is something we have to consciously recreate through deliberate fasting practices. Physical activity patterns were also different. Early humans moved a lot, walking, climbing, carrying, digging, throwing, but the movement was low intensity and constant rather than high intensity and periodic. There was no such thing as sitting still for hours and then doing an intense workout. Instead, there was gentle movement throughout the day, punctuated occasionally by bursts of more intense activity, like running during a hunt or climbing to escape danger. Your cardiovascular system, your muscles, your joints are all designed for this pattern, and they function best when you're moving regularly but gently, not when you're sedentary most of the time and then trying to compensate with intense exercise. The modern pattern of sitting for hours and then exercising for 30 minutes causes problems because sitting itself is harmful. It affects your circulation, your posture, your metabolic rate, your hormone levels, and a brief period of exercise doesn't undo those harms. What your body wants is to be moving almost constantly, not strenuously, but consistently, and to have occasional bursts of higher intensity when needed. This is why practices like walking meetings, standing desks, frequent movement breaks, and generally just moving more throughout the day are more effective for health than trying to exercise away the effects of being sedentary. Sleep patterns, as we've already touched on, were different. The solid 8-hour block is not natural. The natural pattern is segmented sleep, where you sleep for a few hours and wake for a period of quiet wakefulness, then sleep again. And this pattern was universal before the invention of artificial light. The period of wakefulness between sleep segments was used for reflection, for quiet conversation, for intimacy, for lying in the darkness and thinking, and this time had its own quality, a kind of meditative state that most modern people never experience because we expect to sleep straight through, and we're anxious if we don't. Circadian rhythms, the internal biological clocks that regulate sleep and wakefulness, are strongly affected by light exposure, and for early humans the relevant light was sunlight and firelight. Bright light during the day, especially morning light, keeps your circadian rhythm properly aligned. Dim, warm light in the evening from fire signals that it's time to start winding down, and darkness signals that it's time to sleep. Firelight is in the red-orange spectrum, which doesn't suppress melatonin production the way blue light does, which is why firelight in the evening makes you sleepy while screen light keeps you awake. Modern people are exposed to very little bright natural light during the day, especially if we work indoors, and we're exposed to lots of bright artificial light at night, especially blue light from screens, and this completely scrambles our circadian rhythms, making it hard to fall asleep, hard to wake up. Hard to feel alert during the day, hard to feel sleepy at night. The solution is simple in theory: more bright light during the day, less bright light at night, especially blue light, but difficult in practice because it requires changing habits and environments in ways that go against modern norms. Let's talk about stress, because the early human stress response is still exactly what you're experiencing when you feel stressed now, but the triggers are different and the resolution is different. The stress response, the cascade of hormones and physiological changes that happen when you perceive danger, evolved to help you deal with immediate physical threats. When you see a predator, your stress response kicks in. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure rises, your muscles tense, your digestion shuts down, your immune system is suppressed, glucose floods your bloodstream to provide energy, and your attention narrows to focus on the threat. Yeah, this response is adaptive for dealing with immediate danger that requires physical action, fighting or fleeing. For early humans, most stresses were acute and resolvable through physical action. If a predator appeared, you ran or fought or scared it away, and then the threat was over, your stress response turned off, and you recovered. If there was conflict with another person, you addressed it immediately through confrontation or reconciliation, and then it was resolved. If you were hungry, you went and found food, and then you were no longer hungry. The stress response was activated. You took action. The action resolved the problem. The stress response turned off. This cycle worked perfectly. Modern stress is different. Most modern stresses are chronic and not resolvable through physical action. You're stressed about money, about work, about relationships, about health, about the future, and none of these stresses can be resolved by running or fighting. They persist over time, sometimes for months or years, and your stress response is activated chronically and it never fully turns off, and this chronic activation causes enormous damage. It impairs your immune system, disrupts your sleep, affects your digestion, raises your blood pressure, impairs your memory and decision-making, increases inflammation, and contributes to a huge range of diseases from heart disease to diabetes to depression. Your body is experiencing the stress response that's meant to help you escape from a predator, but you're using it to deal with an angry email or a deadline or a financial worry. And because these things can't be resolved through physical action, the stress just continues.